scholars, people who are actually, unlike you and I, experts in the field of genocide studies.
All right, buckle up because this debate explodes fast. Owen Jones slams Israel over war crimes and collective punishments, while Piers Morgan fires back, arguing it's not genocide and clashing about Putin's war in Ukraine. Let's get into it.
Response to Mark Regev there.
A grotesque inversion of reality. I mean, the thing about Israeli spokesperson like that is if I was told the sky was blue, I'd go out the window and check just to be sure.
What did he say that's wrong?
For one thing, talking about the hospital being used as a terror base. Now, let's just bear in mind that Israel's spokespeople have a long track record of lying through the back teeth. When they shot in the head, for example, Shireen Abu Akleh, they said for months and months and months it was Palestinian gunmen. It wasn't. They shot her in the head. James Miller, a brilliant British documentary filmmaker, shot dead 2002 by the Israelis. Years later, of course,
you wouldn't believe Hamas and their version of events either, would you?
Well, that's why I depend on what aid agencies the United Nations are saying on the ground, which is that collective punishment is being unleashed against the Palestinian people. I mean, look, we can see already the evidence they've been unveiling for what they said was a terror hub, including showing CDs and a computer. What they've done to that hospital is, firstly, because they cut off energy in a total siege, which they justified by saying they were fighting human animals, which should be considered genocidal rhetoric, has been condemned as such.
Well, it should certainly be condemned, and they should not have the ability, Israel, to cut off water and power and
because
fuel.
That is collective punishment. Can we agree? Under Article 33, that's against the law. It's a war crime. Can we agree? I think we should have some consensus.
I would argue you're heading towards collective punishment when you do that.
You're not heading towards collective punishment when you cut off energy and water to the entire civilian population.
Except to play devil's advocate and to give their side of it, which I've heard repeatedly, take the issue of fuel. They want to try and get fuel in, the Israelis, as they've said, to the hospitals, to the humanitarian side of this, but they know that Hamas are taking that fuel and using it for their military.
The hospital authorities, who we should listen to, have rebutted those accusations. Look, what's happened here is babies right now are gasping for breath and suffocating. We've had several nurses and patients shot dead. In fact, this whole hospital has been described by medical staff as a mortuary.
But you don't know.
Just quickly, when a hospital becomes a mass grave, when dozens of decomposing bodies have to be buried in a mass grave in a hospital, we're talking what you said. Can I just quote something you said about Putin? And I think this was very wise. You said in March 2022, I'm seeing a genocidal monster killing women and babies in maternity hospitals as we sit back and let him do it. Why was it so disgraceful? But you were right. You were right to be emotional.
Here's the difference.
Why when you see this hospital, is there not the same fury?
Let me explain. Because the two are, in my opinion, morally very different. In one case, Vladimir Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine, he was committing war crimes, having illegally invaded wait a second, let me finish. Having invaded a sovereign democratic country. Here, it was Israel that was invaded by a vast number of terrorists who murdered over 1,500 innocent men, women, children. They kidnapped 240 people, including babies, children, Holocaust survivors. So my point is, morally, there is a massive difference.
Hold on.
Morally, it's a massive difference. Now, the question of the hospital... Wait a sec. The question of the hospitals is this to me. They have so far produced some evidence of Hamas operating inside the hospital. For me, so far, as a journalist trying to be fair and impartial, I don't think, as you've heard me say to Mark Regev, I don't think I've seen enough evidence here which says to me this was a sprawling Hamas command centre. But there is a moral difference between what Putin's doing in Ukraine and what Israel's doing to defend itself against Hamas, isn't there?
Hold on.
Isn't there?
No, absolutely. No, sorry, this is the difference, OK, if you want to talk about that or trying to separate them. For a Ukrainian ordinary civilian being killed or for an ordinary Palestinian child being killed.
Both equally awful.
None of them did anything wrong. No. We agree on that, don't we?
Yes, we do.
We absolutely agree on that. Yes, we do. Now, when you repeatedly denounced Putin for his genocidal behaviour in Ukraine, do you stand by that? Do you think that's a genocide?
Absolutely.
Well, it doesn't matter what the basis for what the operation...
Of course it does.
No.
It does.
No, Piers, in terms of what actually is happening, we can talk about the massacre, the obscene massacre of 1,000...
What Israel's doing is not genocide.
Piers.
You can't keep saying no.
Let's talk about genocide. Let's talk about genocide.
Yeah.
Why is it?
Let me tell you the difference between genocide. Let me put something to you, and you come back at me and tell me if I'm wrong. Hamas, from its charter onwards, and from the spokesman said last week, is dedicated to the eradication of Israel and killing as many Jews as it can possibly kill. That is the purest definition of genocide intent that you will ever see. And they executed it on October the 7th as best they could. Now, what Israel's doing in response, and they've been very firm about this, and the international courts will rule as they...
Piers, these are very long questions.
They're not. I'm answering a point,
okay,
and I'm putting one to you, right? In my estimation, they are qualitatively different. What Hamas is
Can I answer?
Publicly what it's doing is genocide. What Israel's doing is not genocide.
There's a difference between what Israel, you could say both Israel and Hamas have engaged in genocidal and murderous rhetoric.
No.
And I'll give you an example.
No,
yes, they have.
No, you can't.
Benjamin Netanyahu.
No,
I can. Is it uncensored or not?
Yes. You can say
Let me quote what the Israeli authorities have said.
Go on.
Benjamin Netanyahu, when he quoted Amalek, the scriptures, what does Amalek say? He quotes Amalek when they attacked the Israelites. And what God told the Israelites to do was to destroy kill every man, woman, child, and livestock. If I would put it to you, an Islamist leader was quoting a similarly genocidal passage from the Quran, you would not, I would say,
Can I respond?
hesitate.
Can I respond?
We haven't. Just no. But you've had a lot.
Respond to that
I'm going
point.
to respond just quickly. Israeli officials said that Gaza will end up being a city of tents with no building standing. That they are attacking for damage, not for accuracy. The agricultural minister, Avi Dikti, he said we are rolling out a new Nakba. A Nakba is the mass expulsion, 700,000 Palestinians in 1948. This is why hundreds of genocide scholars, people who are actually, unlike you and I, experts in the field of genocide studies, fear that a genocide is taking place. So the difference between Israel and Hamas is Hamas does not have the capacity to wipe out Israel. Israel is wiping Gaza off the map. That's the point.
You've actually exposed the weakness in your argument. Israel does have the ability to kill everyone in Gaza tomorrow, and they're not doing it. In fact, well, hang on. What they're doing, and it's indisputable, they are issuing a number of warnings repeatedly to people to go south. Wait! And stay out of northern Gaza, right? And then they're pulverising it with airstrikes, and now they've gone in on the ground and they're waging battle with Hamas fighters, terrorists, right? No, hang on. So my point is this. Israel could, if they wanted to, kill everyone in Gaza. They decided not to do that.
Is your definition...
genocide is where you want to kill everyone.
Sorry. Your definition of genocide... Because in Ukraine, Vladimir Putin hasn't killed every last Ukrainian. That's simply not happened. No, he hasn't. And nor has he stated his intention to do so. And nor, as brutal and barbaric...
Vladimir Putin, absolutely, by illegally invading a sovereign country and indiscriminately bombing anything in front of him...
Indiscriminately bombing?
...is waging a form of genocide.
Wow. Indiscriminate bombing. Gaza, more than 2 Hiroshima bombs worth have been dropped on East London in the space of 5 weeks.
OK, let me ask you two questions.
No, you've said Ukraine. No, I'm going to have to put this to you.
OK.
15,000 people have now been killed now by the Israelis, estimate, in Gaza. 1 in every 200 people in Gaza have now been killed. If you were to adjust for population in Ukraine, that would be 300,000 Ukrainian civilians. 300,000, there's been a terrible death toll. It's estimated by the UN 10,000 civilians have been killed since February last year. In the space of 5 weeks, a country with a much, much smaller population has had a much higher has had a death toll higher officially than that in Ukraine. So how can it be?
I'm going to answer.
How can it be that you call that genocide, but when you have nearly half the entire civilian death toll of the Bosnian War in a country which is twice the size in terms of population? Why isn't that genocide, Piers?
Well, I've just answered your question by saying if Israel wanted to commit genocide, they would simply...
So would Russia.
They would vaporize...
So would Russia. They would nuke Ukraine.
Russia wants to take over Ukraine.
Yes, and they want to take over Gaza.
And it will kill any number of Ukrainians, men, women and children, in that process.
The death rate... death rate in Gaza is much higher.
The only reason it hasn't is that actually Ukraine has a large military supported by countries like the United States and is putting up one hell of a fight.
Russia has nuclear weapons.
OK. And by the way, Ukraine gave theirs up.
Russia has an armed force.
Let me ask you...
What? No, you've got to accept this.
Hang on. A
far lower death rate in Ukraine.
I've explained why.
I've
explained why.
You haven't explained why.
Yes, I have. Well, let me explain again.
Israel have made it clear.
You didn't hear me.
Israel have made it clear that they intend to occupy Gaza permanently.
Yeah, which they should not be allowed to do.
And what did
we can agree on that.
What did the Israeli ministry leaked intelligence? What did the intelligence ministry
leak? It's my interview of you.
I know, but not
your interview of me.
Well, I think you do need to be held to account on
Let me answer you. Well, let me ask you two questions, which I asked Jeremy Corbyn.
Sure.
Let's get these off the table. Do you believe Hamas is a terror group?
Yes, if you engage in violence against civilian population, that's terrorism.
Okay, wait, don't do supplementaries. Let me just ask you this. Second question, which I asked him and she couldn't answer. Should Hamas remain in power?
If I could wave a magic wand, then no, obviously there'd be an independent, let me finish. There'd be an independent Palestine, free of Israeli rule, with a secular democratic movement in power. The difference
I agree with you.
When you courageously stood against the Iraq war, and you were courageous for doing so, what was the argument put against you? That you wanted to keep Saddam Hussein in power even though he gassed his own people, the Kurds, and committed genocide, many would argue, that he had invaded his neighbour, and that he had massacred the Shia when they rose up in 1991. Now, your argument against that was that what could happen next would be far, far worse. And you were right.
That wasn't my argument.
Well, that is the argument. So did you want to keep Saddam Hussein in power?
Don't tell me what my argument was. I know what it was. I was editor of the paper that waged the campaign.
Did you want Saddam Hussein to remain in power?
I did not believe that they had produced any evidence that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. I thought he had nothing to do with 9/11. Therefore, we were waging a completely irrelevant war, which I thought would stir up absolute hell in the Middle East. And you know what? I was right.
Yeah.
And actually, most of the architects of that war now concede they were wrong.
Yeah, they were wrong.
It was a horror story from start to finish. But what it did do is spark the rise of ISIS. And what the world did with ISIS was say, this crosses a moral line, we have to get rid of them. And we went after ISIS in places like Iraq and Syria and other countries. And in bombing the hell out of ISIS, a lot of civilians got killed.
You just skipped a lot of very important history.
Wait a minute.
No, that's not what happened.
Well, that is what happened.
No, that's not what happened.
One of the consequences of the Iraq war was that ISIS became a very powerful, for a short period of time, global terror force committing atrocity.
Can I just correct your version of history?
But in wiping out ISIS pretty effectively, we also killed a lot of civilians.
No, what actually happened...
What's the moral difference between that and what Israel's doing in Gaza?
You just revised history. We were told that Al-Qaeda was perhaps in league with Saddam Hussein. That was one of the justifications of invading. What actually happened after the invasion was that it became a playground for Al-Qaeda, who you've missed out, I've noticed.
No.
And what happened...
We know about Al-Qaeda. I'm talking about ISIS.
What happened, for example, is Fallujah, the city of Fallujah in Iraq, the Americans went in and they massacred people protesting against their rule, and many of those Sunni populations ended up driven into the arms of Al-Qaeda. A brutal counterinsurgency program then resulting in mass slaughter of innocent Sunni civilians, and from that fury and anger, something even worse than Al-Qaeda emerged. Just as...
ISIS?
Yes.
So you agree with
that was... No, I'm saying that's exactly what we're seeing today.
I didn't give every detail of the journey.
No.
I just said, out of the Iraq
You've misunderstood.
War...
You've misunderstood.
Right.
They engaged in a brutal counterinsurgency...
I know the story.
...offensive against Al-Qaeda, and that caused something worse to emerge. Just as in Afghanistan...
I know.
Just as Afghanistan, we had 2 decades of occupation.
Listen, we're running out of time.
2 decades of occupation, and the Taliban emerged stronger than ever. The same applies to both what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan. It
seems to me...
Because if you brutalise a population,
Owen.
you will turn them into terrorists.
Stop talking.
Or extremists, and drive them to their arms.
You make a lot of good points. I agree with a lot of things you say, right? Always have done, actually. I find the way you say them, as you do with me, quite annoying. But that's fine. You're allowed to, and we're uncensored. Come back. I want to end, if I can, with some kind of... Look, we've agreed Hamas is a terror group. We've agreed they have to go. How do we actually get peace here?
Well, firstly, we have to deal with the underlying causes of what's driven the Palestinian people in the case of Gaza into the hands of Hamas, which is, starting in 1948, the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian population in the Nakba, with 700,000 driven from their homes, murderously, I might add. Then...
And hundreds of thousands of Jews were driven from their homes before that.
Not in Palestine.
Well, they were driven away from Arab countries.
Hold on.
They were driven away from Arab countries.
Yeah, from Palestine.
Jonathan Friedland wrote a very good piece about this, saying, you know what, if you go into history, there's just cause on both sides.
The Palestinians were driven from their homes, 700,000 of them. And then we had the illegal settlements and colonisation, including in the West Bank, were completely unremarked upon.
And I've already condemned
there was mass terror, illegal settlements, and as well as Amnesty International, as Human Rights Watch and B'Tselem describe it, the Israeli Human Rights Organisation, a system of apartheid.
But
if you keep brutalising the Palestinian people, ridding them of their freedom, and you end up now in Gaza with parents picking up the burned, dismembered remnants of their children, Owen, there will never be peace.
I agree. What I would say to that is that on the Arab side, they have had multiple opportunities to do a peace deal, not least in 2000 with Arafat, and he walked away.
No, what happened there? Go on. What were the concessions? Because this is shrouded in myth.
The truth is, Bill Clinton, who helped forge peace in Northern Ireland brilliantly with Tony Blair and with the others involved there, that actually Arafat, they had peace in their grasp, and as Bill Clinton said to him, I'm going to end up being a failure because of you and looking away.
And that revision of history again, not just from you on this program, but by Bill Clinton, because they demanded, for example, land swaps for a ratio 9 to 1 in the favour of Israel.
Come back again.
I'd love to.
No, seriously, this conflict's not going away.
No, sadly
it's going to continue raging the war. I think you're an important voice in this. We should keep talking about it.
Okay, we'll chat.
And that's the clash. Owen Jones holding Israel to account, Piers Morgan pushing back just as hard. A fiery debate with no middle ground. If you like this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Until next time.